Hi, and welcome to the ICTF AHSTF Online series about taking a show to the Edinburgh Fringe. Your host today is Heather Hutton. Heather is a lighting designer and a member of your tech team and has designed the lighting plot for two of our venues for the past 2 years, and then works with the rest of our team and our Scottish team to actually build out the theaters, including the theater in which Richard, Olivia, and Sydney performed in. So I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to Heather. Heather, thank you for hosting the conversation.
Thanks, Ray. Hi, everyone. Today, our panel discussion is called Water Without Water, and the subtitle is The Thing Without the Thing. My name is Heather Hutton, and as Ray said, I'm a lighting designer and have been for over 20 years. And I do design the light plots for one of our main venues. So I work with everybody getting their show in and cued in the board and generally hold hands when needed. One of my favorite stage things that wasn't actually a thing happened during 24/7, which is a festival that Ray produces and I designed for here in Charlottesville. And it's 7 plays created in 24 hours, and we have very limited tech time. And the plot point that was the thing was that an android had to eject from a spaceship and float by outside the spaceship. And the director, who had not very much time, asked for a long cable that could be rigged across the top of the stage with a space pod going by. Well, we didn't have time to do anything like that. We had, 10, 15 minutes to figure out what they needed. And what happened was the actor who was playing the android lay on a tiny little furniture dolly off stage, which was attached to a rope. And a stagehand pulled the dolly very slowly in space across the back of the stage while the actor on the dolly waved their arms and legs as if they were in zero gravity. That was it. There was no space pod. There was no cable. It was literally a rope and a dolly and an actor. The audience laughed the entire trip from stage right to stage left. So that is an example of a thing without a thing. So today I would like to introduce you to some of the people who were in Water, H2O, the water play. And I'd first like to introduce you to Sydney Miles, who is a student at the University of Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, otherwise known as CCM, at least in our shorthand. And I got to work with you at the Fringe in 2018. So hi, Sydney, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience at the Fringe?
Sure thing. Thank you for having us. I'm very honored and excited to be here. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I'm a student graduating senior at CCM, and I went to Edinburgh the summer after my freshman year. So I was fairly new to the program and to Richard as a director, and especially to international festivals. And so I was so excited to go to Edinburgh. And when we were rehearsing with water and Richard presented us with 6 pieces of fabric as our ocean or lake or pool or whatever it was, in the beginning, I was a little skeptical and hesitant, how was this gonna work? How are we gonna make this look real? But through movement and the support and direction of Richard and our castmates, they helped me realize that the purpose of the fabrics weren't to convince you that this is an ocean on a stage, and that we weren't flying all those miles to be this is an ocean and these people are actually dying, but that we are using these fabrics to support the story that we're telling and to lift it up. And so then in my case, whenever I would go and grab the fabrics, to me, the fabrics became a different character. It wasn't like a costume piece or a set piece, but it was its own character that was layered into the story. But it was an amazing experience, rehearsing and performing and just seeing everybody's shows and being international. It was an amazing experience.
That's awesome, Sydney. I would also now like to introduce you to Olivia Buss, who is also a student at CCM. And can you talk about your experience at the Fringe and with this show in particular?
Yeah, so I'm also in the same boat as Sydney. I was a freshman. When we did H2O, it was actually my second time at the Fringe though, so I was kind of familiar with Fringe style theater. Seen a lot of like physical theater before, but this was my first time actually like being in a show at the Fringe. And I remember like one of the first things Richard told us when we began rehearsal was like, water exists in like so many forms, infinite forms, and it does so many things. And what our job was to use these literal physical theatrical devices, the fabric, and a movement training that we started to learn, a new vocabulary, to embody the forms that real water has and convey that as best as possible as we could on stage. So we used these pieces of fabric for, I'm sure we'll see pictures later, but huge royal blue waves, streams of water. We used it as props in a bucket of water. We used umbrellas to portray like water seeping in during natural disasters. We used them as umbrellas. We used a more sheer kind of fabric to represent the drought and the lack of water. So with those pieces, and then with this movement physical training and a lot of practice, we were able to kind of live as this ensemble and exist as one, move as one, which is what water does. And yeah, that was my experience. It was a blast.
That's wonderful. And it was wonderful. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to Richard Hess, who is the director of H2O, A Play About Water. Hi, Richard. Okay, there you go.
Hey, everybody. And thank you, Heather. It's a pleasure to be here today and tell some stories. If I have to introduce myself, I would just say I was a high school teacher for 7 years, and now I've been a university teacher for a long time. I won't bore you with numbers, but I've always loved actors and making theater, and had a dream to go to the Edinburgh Fringe my whole life, and did a few Fringe festivals in the States, got some practice, and finally in 2018, took an original devised piece called H2O, A Play Without Water, across the ocean. And today, I think my hope is to just talk about a type of theater that travels well in Fringe festivals and also just makes good theater. And give you some examples of what we did simply that, both Olivia and Sydney just articulated, that the feeling of water is what we were creating as opposed to the literalness. And sometimes in theater, because we try to compete with film, we try to get real literal and make sure the audience gets it. And then sometimes your theater actually suffers. So especially in a Fringe, to remember the thing we all know, less is more, really matters. So I'm going to jump right in and say, Ray, if you could put up a first image, the first photo. When I say devised theater, that means we did not bring an existing script. We came up with an idea and we added songs, movement, blog posts, scientific entries, poems about an idea, and devised our own script. And so we had some freedom. One of the first devised pieces I made was called Unnatural Disaster. And that was a long time ago, maybe in 2008 or 9. And I explored the damage we were doing to our planet, and we call things natural disasters, but I had the feeling that we were making them worse through global warming and that they were becoming unnatural. Here it was in 2018, what do you want to do, Richard? And that was when I had just been hearing about global warming and the rise of water and severe drought that is happening in our planet in new and different ways. So we didn't want to make a piece that was preachy or that tried to give an answer, but instead told human stories. So my fun story would be, a year before we went to Scotland, I named our show because people always say, what are you going to bring? So on the familiarization tour 1 year earlier, I started saying, I'm going to bring a show called H2O. And then they'd say, what's that? And I'd say, it's a play about water. So I actually then put a colon after the word H2O, and we just called it H2O, a play about water. And no one needed to ask what they would be seeing. Sometimes the hardest part is coming up with your words, your title, your main idea. But once you do, then you can be free to create from there. So I was posing the question, what is our societal relationship to water? What are human relationships with the power and necessity of water? And we were able to look at too much water, rising oceans, polluted waters, floods, hurricanes, death from water, drownings, lead in drinking water in Flint, Michigan, waterboarding. And then we went to too little water, shortages of drinking water, drought, forest fires due to lack of water, even the simplicity of euthanasia, which sometimes involves choosing to die by stopping the intake of food and water. And then we also thought we could look at the lack of respect for water, oil pipelines through sacred lands and under rivers. And then we wanted to end hopefully with the healing power of water. Water is a blessing. Some water gods, because through history, we've all thought the power of water was godlike. And lastly, water to heal and water to soothe. So we made a show about water, and it ended up being a play about water without any water. Ray, if you want to go to slide 2, here's another image. In the first image, you saw some royal blue China silk, and here you are seeing a shimmer fabric that picks up light beautifully. And we had 3 panels of each kind of fabric, and that was our main prop source. I will tell you that when I started, I did dream of having water on stage. That's a road you have to go down because it sounds too cool. So I also love the danger that liquids bring being on stage. It's kind of like acting with a dog or a small child. Water will go places, it's real, and it can have a life of its own. So I thought, oh, small kiddie pools filled with water, and we could splash from those, or we could douse somebody, or we could cleanse somebody or submerge them. It would be real. Then, of course, people started saying, what about water guns? What about super soakers? What about bottles of water? And then I stopped, and I just said, stop. In a Fringe festival, you are going to have limitations from a theater. As soon as you read on the list, no liquids allowed, our show would die. And so when heading to a Fringe, I always try to think ahead of time, how do I be foolproof to maximize our time? And the answer was no water. I'm going to show you about 3 slides in a moment. And through my directing career, I've started recently being drawn to scripts that I'm going to call epic ensemble scripts that are almost filmic in nature. So instead of a 2-act kitchen sink drama where we're in a living room the whole time, you might have 50 or 60 or 70 scenes to get to. and action's going to go swiftly in time and space to new places, like in a film. But because they're asking us to do that in theater with these scripts, you must follow that less is more. So photo number 3, please. This is a play called Anonymous by Naomi Ayazuka. If anyone has not encountered that, I recommend it as a beautiful piece for high schools. It is filmic in nature. Here is a scene that we suddenly had to appear in a subway tunnel, and we did just roll out a disc with a light in it, and through actors and their movement and physicality, we made the audience think that 2 guys were waiting in a tunnel where a train might come through it. And first they're playing, and of course then we put 2 bright lights behind them when the train started coming, and they got to take off running. Next slide. A play called Coram Boy by Helen Edmondson. This play premiered at the National Theatre in London. Again, it has 60 or 70 scenes. There was a scene in a cathedral, then we went somewhere else, then we came back to a cathedral. So I grabbed this shot to just show 3 actors standing in solo lights, and we were in a cathedral. That idea of making something that isn't really something, especially when you can't travel with scenery in airplanes. Photo number 5. Another script you may not be familiar with is called Her Naked Skin. It's by Rebecca Lenkowitz. And it is a story about women fighting for the right to vote in England at the turn of the last century. This is a moment where a woman in prison has been through a bad relationship and tries to kill herself. And so this is a simple shot, but through a few lights and actor performance and some red dye, we had a suicide. And number 6, this is a script I know many high schools are taking a look at, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, based on a novel, and the play is by Simon Stevens. And it is a script that will challenge you to be at a school, in a house. You're going to be on train tracks, in a subway station. You're going to take a journey, and it is very filmic and would be a great piece if trying to do less with more would challenge you, because you can't build each set. You have to solve it with movement, actors, and imagination. Okay, slide 7. This is Olivia, who spoke to us a little bit earlier. And in H2O, a play about water, she told a story about a young girl who was on a vacation with a friend and her family. And they were in the ocean on a beautiful beach, and we could smell beautiful flowers and hear the ocean. And they missed the sign that said the tides were dangerous. And as they were playing in the water, they realized that the girl's mother was drowning right next to them. And so this is Olivia in 2 pieces of fabric representing an ocean, not to make us think about water, but what happens when people are in water and the water becomes dangerous. I'm going to share some words from Anne Bogart as I go forward, and we head to me finishing just a little talk. And that would be a director's responsibility to me begins in the rehearsal. And so I love always asking, what is a rehearsal? When does the art start? It doesn't just start when you perform for the audience. It must exist in the rehearsal room. And if you treat time and space in a demanding way in rehearsals, that's where imagination occurs, where flight occurs. And so I will tell you that I had the fabric for day 1 of rehearsal. And for the first few weeks, we knocked each other over with it. We got tangled around people's necks. We had very poor timing. And this scene with the ocean, How do you get the fabric high in the back and low in the front, so you might give the illusion that it's more an aerial view of the water, so this scene feels different than others? And of course, I thought people on other shoulders holding the fabric high in the air. We tried that. We didn't have enough actors. That quickly died. How can we quickly hold fabric up in the air as high as possible? And I'll tell you, and I can't remember the exact journey, but we ended up with foldable tent poles. And those could just quickly fold, 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 go in a suitcase case, and on stage go snap, snap, snap. And they were 8 feet tall. And we sewed little triangular flaps in 2 of the corners. The pole slid into it, and boom, they went high in the air to give us the feeling of ocean. I had done something like that once on stage where the fabric came out of a wall, but I never tried to do it with just people in a space. And that's the fun of rehearsal. We found that, we practiced that, we got good at that early. We didn't try to add it at the last second. Next photo. This image will show us right next to Olivia. We had this image of the woman bobbing and floating and coming through the waves. And you get to see Sydney helping to hold up this actress. Turned out to be a very evocative scene with 3 pieces of fabric, 6 tent poles, and some people. I like saying that directing feels like juggling, and that comes from Anne Bogart, who I studied with. You have to juggle psychologies of people, you have to juggle timing, you juggle the meaning of what you're making, spatial arrangements on stage, and you try to keep as many ideas in the air at a time as possible. In a good rehearsal, you try to be in service of something larger than yourself. And this play let me practice that. We can go to the next slide. I referred to the play Anonymous, and this is where I first made an ocean with fabric. And this I had a set that the fabric could fall out of. Actors then grabbed the bottom, pulled it down stage, and then they could wave the fabric. We could be stormy, we could be calm, we could send little ripples. And so the picture of Olivia, I was trying in a Fringe to recreate a feeling like this shot from Anonymous. We could go to the next slide. I feel that the theater is like a gym for the soul, and the imagination and the emotions that you can practice. At the movies, you buy popcorn so that you can lean back, let the images wash over you, and the story comes at you. In the theater, we want the audience to lean forward, to be the active participant, to be responsible for meaning and the ownership of the event. In this shot from Coram Boy, I had to stage a hanging. And again, I started with, how do we build a scaffold? How do we get a harness on the actor? How do we make it safe? What is the ladder he would climb? And then we would try to do a realistic hanging. And that's again when I said, we can't. I have to be in another scene in a minute. We don't have the budget. And instead we had the hangman come out with a noose. He stood up stage with it. He ceremoniously put it over the actor's head. There were a bunch of people downstage watching. The actor was upstage center with the noose. And at the moment of pulling out the door where he would have fallen through, he ran full speed toward the audience with the rope around his neck. Those that were downstage went running upstage and turned back. And he was able to put his hands on the rope, slowly lean forward, and then with an uplight, hung himself a foot away from the audience. Viscerally, I remember the audience crying out. It was almost like you were below the hanging and the body came at you. So that's this image. That's the thing without the thing. And we could go to the next slide. This is a picture of Sydney at work in H2O, a play about water. And she had to tell a story along with another actress. We interwove the stories about people dying because of a lack of water. In Sydney's case, it was a story we found about a woman's mother who decided to end her own life, and she stopped drinking. And Sydney was telling the story about what happens to the body at the end and how surprisingly peaceful it was to lose her mother this way, despite the grief of losing her mother. While another woman told a story about being in the Dust Bowl and losing children during a drought. We took the sheer fabric and we moved it slowly toward these two actors as they told their stories by having actors on the side sitting on the shoulders of other actors, holding it as high as they could. And the fabric slowly came toward Sydney as she told this story. It actually then went over her head and then fell in front of her. And in the next shot, you'll see Sydney through the sheer. If we can go to that, Ray. And she had to finish the monologue with this barrier of just dry, shimmery, and there was no blue then. We chose lights that Heather had in the plot where it was golden and yellow in color and did not resemble water, but the absence of water. And so that's just another idea. This is from Anne Bogart. If you want the audience to be an active participant, leave blanks for the audience to fill in. And that's what we kept doing and trusting that the story could then be written by the audience as well as us. When you work this way, your story is not one thing, it's many things. One more thing where the thing wasn't the thing, it's one you might have done before. It's an easy one, but boy, does it work. In Coram Boy, I had to have a chase scene in a forest. And scenic designers will start with, how do we build it? What do the trees look like? Do we fly them in? Are they painted? Are they dimensional? And instead we came up with finding a bunch of sticks. Women with shawls over their head came out and were able to instantly walk onto stage, form a stage picture, and the chase happened through it. So that's a shot I took with that's a moving body, but you can feel how the audience then gets to feel the spirit of a tree without needing to build a tree. So just another example. We can go to next, Ray. Now I'm going to just talk through a bunch of images from the show in Scotland. We needed some comic relief. I think you can hear that our show might have been horribly serious and sad, and it was for the most part, because what's happening with the human race in water is not happy right now. But we did say, let's send a couple across who just fishes a lot. And then we got to put some fish in the show and a boat. And they were in beautiful blue water originally. And then, of course, we let the water get polluted and the fish died. So here is a foam core boat with a simple sail. The pole in the woman's hand is a fishing pole. I'm sorry, a tent pole. And we just put it straight up in the air and put a flat two-dimensional foam core sail on it. The boat was held with ropes over their shoulders and was just very simply a two-sided boat that they could stand up, walk themselves on stage. And when they went fishing, they were tent poles again. We had no reel, no lines, but just again, a pole in the hand told the story. We had more than one drowning in the show, and this is the blue fabric. And we found a beautiful piece written about someone and the feeling they had while drowning in the ocean and how peaceful and calm it is. And we just took an actor, we had fabric on the ground, we blew it up into the air into a big billow, and then we had actors lift that drowning person, and he told his story through a seam in the fabric. very evocative, very simple, very waterful, and very dry. Next, we did a waterboarding scene. And we just took an actor and we gave the feeling of water being poured through his body until he was unconscious. And so here you can just see he's kind of tied down by the water, weight of the water, at the end of being waterboarded. We can go to next. We had a story about a young girl who climbed onto an above ground pool when dared to by some young friends, thinking that it was frozen, and then falling through the ice and slowly falling down to the bottom and looking up. And because of the cold water, instantly the feeling of calmness came over, could hear music, and just the unreality of being on water and then underwater instantly. And we built an above ground pool on stage by having the actors stand in a circle. We had them sit on the ground with the fabric behind their backs. And then when she fell through, they stood up, raised the sides so you could see in as if you were looking into an above ground pool. And those are the supports on the side. Next. We did a scene about poisoned water in Flint, Michigan, and as a story was told by a young father about a sickness of his child and then himself never guessing it was the water, we slowly wrapped him in the sheer fabric so that it was the invisible killer, the poisoned water, and used the fabric in yet another way where it was water that wasn't water. Next. We ended our piece with a prayer walk where people stepped into the water in South Dakota to protest the pipeline that was put on their sacred land and went under the river. And as they stood in the water in silent protest, officers on the other side maced them and tried to send them back, and they would step out of the water and new people would step in. And in this image, you see the protesters standing simply on the piece of fabric with witnesses behind them as they tried to protect the water. And next, this might be my last one. This is the Happy Healthy boat with some fishing poles, a couple life jackets, a two-dimensional boat that could fit in a suitcase. And one thing I didn't say, our show traveled to Scotland in one extra large red suitcase. So all the fabric, the tent poles, the foam core was cut into small pieces and we taped it together. Actors brought their own costumes and we had a show that looked pretty huge and was actually quite small. I think we can finish with, we made a trailer video of our performance in Cincinnati. It's about 3.5 minutes long, and you'll see these images moving now.
The Greeks called me Poseidon, the Americans Katrina, Harvey, Irma. I am both the dam breaker and the hands that cut Monet's lilies. The color of storms in your lover's eyes. No levee can be built strong enough. Yet when your skin is still fluid and your eyes not yet formed, I'll rock you to sleep, even where the hands of your homeland cannot touch you. Where you promise to return to me when you die. Can you remember that promise? Amongst the crashing flags as you fight to contain me in your borders. Elijah once lit me on fire as a miracle of God, but now my rivers are so polluted you could ignite my surface with a dropped match. Who cries for spilt water? I am more precious than oil, yet you squander me by the half-full bottle. Never pour out the cup that runneth over, it is the dust. When I am no longer clean, when I gut the fish's gills and it rains poison, who will nourish your children? As you unlock me by the ice caps, will you know when my love note to life turns into a death threat? Would you fear me? Would you pray for me then? To my sons and daughters, don't cry. There is a promise my warriors are making for you. They promise me no one will come and devour you. No greedy whale of a company sharking through political seas. No blindfolded bureaucracies can push this mother ocean over. No one's drowning. No one's moving. They promise me. No one's losing their homeland. No one will become a climate change refugee. Still, there are those who see you. Fists raising up. Hands reaching out. Banners unfurling, megaphones booming. They are canoes blocking coal ships. We are the radiance of solar villages. We are the rich, clean soil of the farmer's past. We are petitions blooming from teenage fingertips. And we are spreading the word, hand in hand, chanting, change now. And we're marching for you. And we're marching for him and her and them, because you deserve to do more than just survive. My sons and daughters, they promise me we will not let you down. You'll see.
People here listening and for the future, I could say one more thing for the Fringe, where raising money and budgets and student travel was where I wanted to put my focus to make this as affordable for the students and not let the production be the cost. We did all our costumes at Goodwill. So we just said before rehearsal started, buy blue things. And they bought very interesting blue things. And we rehearsed in those as part of rehearsal for, a good week then. It's not something that comes in at the end, so that everything is integrated and on the cheap so that you can enjoy your time on the Royal Mile using your money in other ways for good food and culture.
Are there any other questions from the panel for Richard or the students?
Here, it was great to watch the slideshow and the video, and then to kind of remember Sydney and Olivia's faces and all the other actors you had. I mean, that's one thing because I could relive the feelings of the show because the images were so strong and seen. And of course, we're working like 45 shows. We're all seeing like 30 more shows, in the Fringe. So sometimes the specifics fade, but watching those images, Richard and Olivia and Sydney, it really kind of brought the feelings back. So that was really good. So I guess I'd like to hear from Sydney and Olivia. What was it the Fringe, like has the Fringe experience changed you, or just like what was your favorite part of the whole Fringe experience? Maybe besides performing, unless it was performing?
For me, I had never been to a theater festival of any kind. So to jump in with the Edinburgh was quite of a bold choice. But my favorite thing about it, I have a lot of favorite things about my experience there, but one important thing that I learned for my education is that I see there's different shows obviously in Cincinnati and different theaters, and so we're given the opportunity to see different theater, but nothing compared to my experience of seeing theater in Edinburgh, just because I remember I watched one play where two French women did this 2-woman show, and I had no idea what they were saying, but I was just so excited to be there and so excited to see what they were doing. And I just saw a theater of all different like forms and kinds. And so that really opened my eyes to, there isn't like one set format or standard for theater. And plays can be super, I remember I saw one where this guy was a fish the whole time, and he was being funny and stuff. And I was like, so there's truly no like, there's nowhere we can't take theater, we know where we can't go and touch base with. So that was probably my favorite thing and the most important thing for my education.
I agree with that completely. I think the experience of the Fringe is like no other experience, particularly getting exposed to so many different kinds of art and theatrical performance. And I think that's the main thing I've taken away with me, is that when I think back on like my favorite theatrical works I've ever seen, I immediately think of like one-person shows I saw in Edinburgh or ensemble shows I saw there, and just like the boundaries of everything I knew as theater were completely broken and expanded, and it was just so exciting to me, and I still feel that way thinking back. And I think that's the main thing I choose to talk about when I talk to people about the Fringe Festival. I just say that there's more than you could even imagine, and it's kind of like a out-of-body experience, the amount of art you get to consume. What about you, Richard?
I have a soft spot for Scotland. I have a soft spot for the people there. And I agree that the entire international aspect and the irreverence that you encounter when you're used to trying to make theater that is right is so inspiring. So I think you're hearing us say we love to go to perform, but when you're there to perform, you get to go to other shows all day long and watch as much theater as you can.
I agree completely. Would you all go again? Us too.
I'll make a prediction right here. Olivia Buss is going to direct something in the Edinburgh Fringe at some date in her life in the future. And I can't wait till she makes that happen.
Hopefully next summer.
Awesome. Hopefully next summer for everyone. Okay.
Yes, well, remember that we'll all be there. The AHSTF, the ICTF, the tech team. So make sure you, if you can't get a hold of me, get a hold of Richard to get a hold of us, because if you're doing something, we'll let everyone know that's traveling with us, which is up to 600 people. So we'll let them all know that you're doing something and you're an alum. I have a hard time like getting the plural, getting the words right in English, let alone Latin. So Heather, is that it? Is you gonna wrap it up? It's about
I think we can wrap it up. I think we've covered quite a bit. So I want to say thank you to everyone who participated in this. I'm really excited that this is going to be recorded and other people can see it. Well, I guess this concludes our panel.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia and Sydney. And
thank you for including us. We appreciate it. And I would love to thank my graduated seniors who are ready for the world for telling stories from their freshman year. It's been just so lovely watching you grow up as theater artists.
Go out into a world where live performance is happening again.
That's right. Hope to see you out there.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.